voice of Fintech.
So welcome to Voice of Fintech.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Today we're joined by Cedric, who is the founder and host of Global Textbox, which is a video and media production company that focuses on startup scene in Switzerland. And we wanted to find out more about your impressions of the Swiss startup scene, Israeli startup scene, and also why did you start this venture and how did it all come together? So can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, why did you start these video programs about startups in Switzerland?
Yes. So first of all, my name is Cedric Bollag. I grew up, born and raised in Switzerland. And then after I finished high school, I actually moved to Israel for a couple of years. And I ended up staying there for 7 years. And I really was put into this startup ecosystem as an innovation scout for one of the research companies in Israel. And I was really excited about all of these tech entrepreneurs and new tech that I was seeing there. Specifically, something that I have never experienced before is the spark in these entrepreneurs' eyes, how they are enjoying and passionate about what they're actually building. And that was something that was super inspiring to me. And I said, I want to be part of this. I want to support these people with whatever I have. I actually started then with a text-based blog where I said, okay, I'm going to take an entrepreneur, I'm going to introduce them to my audience. Unfortunately, that failed horribly. So no one actually read my blog posts. And then in mid-2016, I published my first video, which for the first time got feedback, a lot of feedback. Unfortunately, it was very bad feedback because people said well, it's a very cool video. I know the person even, but the production of the video was really bad. Now, I have an academic background in finance and business. I have no idea of anything that is related to creative production of anything. So then it took some time to really figure out how to produce videos. And this is a really exciting time. We are constantly learning new things. But what we realized is that people really like to see what is going on. They like to hear from people who are actually in the process. And then what we felt is we can add value to these entrepreneurs by giving them exposure, in our case specifically to investors. This is what we do till today. So we are trying to really get the best entrepreneurs onto our show, give them the exposure they need to really get to the next step, but also give them a framework to really introduce themselves to the audience in a setting that feels comfortable for them, in an atmosphere where they feel like they can share and talk freely.
All right. So my next question was, what is Global Textbox? So you kind of beat me to it, but fair enough. What is your focus? In terms of sectors, or within Switzerland, do you just cover Zurich, or you cover Lausanne as well? Do you go abroad? Do you do events, or do you bring people all to your studios, or all of the above? And where do you focus really?
Yes. As the name already indicates, we're global. So yes, we do have a Swiss focus at the moment. The reason for that is purely financial, because it's not so simple to just travel around the world and go meet startups all around the world. But our ambition is really to be globally present, to really find the best deals out of the global world. And that is our goal, and that is what we're trying to do. We try to reach investors from all around the world, and we try also on the other side to find the best entrepreneurs from around the world. So we've had companies or founders from Switzerland, from Israel, from the US, from China, we had even from Turkey. So we had from all types of places.
Understood.
So if you say Lausanne is within Switzerland. So we also have people come on from Geneva and Lausanne, obviously. But we don't really focus on one specific geography at the moment. Now, in terms of vertical, I see there's a kind of two types of startup early stage investments you can make that differentiate themselves primarily in the amount of capital needed in the beginning. One is ICT, and the other one I would say now a very big category is pharma and biotech, which is just a very different mindset when you talk about it. So at the moment we exclude those because it's just a very different startup environment there. So we are really focusing on companies that are in the tech space, companies that are trying to do something B2C, B2B, software, whatever it might be, but less in those two fields.
But that's in terms of guests. So in terms of your audience, who is your target audience?
So we are looking to reach people who are either already actually investing in startups, looking to invest in startups, and ideally people who are also investing in funds, in venture capital funds, we're looking to like really create this deal flow for them also, but also that we are kind of like the forerunners and like people coming to us to hear which are the latest startups that need to be looked at. And that works. Like people come to us, they ask us like what kind of startups are in your pipeline, which ones have you looked at and maybe decided not to feature them, which is a very exciting. This is our thesis from the beginning, that if we have the best startups on our show, the best investors will come to us to ask. And that works.
Okay, great. So you are a private venture, though. You're not funded by the government or anybody on public funds. So how do you make money? You've been around for 3 years. So how does that kind of media business work?
Yes. I mean, for us, the media business is something that we do as a temporary thing that came kind of like very naturally to us. So right now, the way we make money is branded content. So we have a couple of like big clients that we work for. And they say like, we want to do a 4-part video series about 5G, for example, like Huawei. They asked us to do that. So we did that. And then we had Jeep coming to us and gave us one of their cars. So we did a carpool karaoke, like just like carpool karaoke, but we did like interviews inside the car. We built up GoPros inside the car. We talked about innovation. So those kind of things that like we get paid to do these kind of video series. Now, long term, like our goal will be definitely to like be like a venture capital fund, whether that's a structure for VC or something else is still undecided. But like it's really important that like we cannot just allocate resources to the startups. We also want to allocate capital and really get a stake in these companies that we feel have the biggest potential for a high upside.
Okay, understood. So you've been around for a few years on the Swiss startup scene. Can you share your impressions or your views on that scene? Also, if you compare it to other countries or globally, as you said, right?
Yes.
In terms of where do you think are the strengths? Where do you think that there should be things that could be improved? What are your views on that?
Yes. I mean, Switzerland, I think, is a very interesting market for various reasons. I'm not saying everything is perfect, but like there's a lot of interesting things. Number one, we have the whole academic research that is going on here at ETH and EPFL, which I think is fascinating stuff. I mean, like I see sometimes these PhDs that are being commercialized, and then they're becoming their own startups, which is very fascinating to see what kind of tech that's like from precision GPS to drones, all kind of things that is coming out of ETH, which is fascinating. So that is like from a tech perspective. Then we have obviously the capital, which is around here in Switzerland. There are a lot of individuals who are willing to invest in, let's say, early stage startups. So it's fairly easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's fairly easy to find capital for the first couple of years. It gets harder when you want to go for the bigger rounds from 20 millions and up. That is fairly hard, specifically in Switzerland. But that is like from an entrepreneurial perspective, the early days can be very good. Now, from a political perspective, it's very hard for young in age people who want to get started, because if you want to have an algae as an example, you need to have 100,000 upfront to put into the company. You can say yes, 50. It can be, some of it can be a car. I understand, but still you need to have assets of 100,000, which is a big hurdle for a lot of people to really get started, while you can still like sleep comfortably. You know that the risk is not on your private person; it's still within the company. So that is one of the biggest things. And then you have what is like the mindset of Switzerland, which is super interesting, is and it can be also positive and negative, but it's just this mindset of perfection. Now, when you're building a product for a potential consumer, there's always a moment where you have to understand, okay, like now is the time to go out, even though the product is not perfect yet. But nevertheless, it's not bad to want something to look nice. It's not bad to have something that like should work perfectly. But as we have the book here, Running Lean, like sometimes you just have to understand that like some things will never be perfect. And that is something, this perfection versus execution is something that I sometimes see here in Switzerland, that people think too much or strategize for too long till they actually get started. And that is something I would say, like by me, is probably one of the prime examples. I mean, people go back, we are now at 182 videos of the Startup Show. Please do not go back to my first 50 videos. They're horrible, but like we had to get started somewhere and we had to work with the feedback to really understand like what do the users, or my audience, what do the investors really want to see. And this is a running process that is constantly changing and might be a different answer last week than it is in 2 years. So like it's a very interesting concept. So this perfection is a very big strength, merged probably with someone who can really like execute, and that's where the Israelis come in. Like they're very good at like execution, and sometimes like maybe the lack of perfection.
But yeah, of course, the tech angle is undisputed engineering in Switzerland. But what do you think about scalability and ambition? Especially when you look at the tech startups, I often see that a lot of them don't think big enough. I would have thought. So, what is your observation on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably connected to the risk taking and the risk aversity that like a lot of people have. That they say like, okay, like I want to try something, but I don't want to try it like at a global scale. Let me try it in Hinterpiplitz. Let me see what my family and my people around me tell me, and then see, and then we'll grow, and
Right.
then we'll conquer Zurich, and then we'll conquer Basel, and then we'll conquer this. But like if you're building a product that should be, at least by definition, should be usable globally,
Right.
then it's a very different mindset. And this is, I agree with you, sometimes lacking. And I try really hard to ask the entrepreneurs, like, okay, like, how do you get this to a $1 billion company and not like to a 10 million? How do you get this out there into every single country tomorrow or today?
Yeah, because I spoke to some other guests in Switzerland. They said there's great ideas and there are great businesses being launched, but often they kind of plateau at the level of SME, with 10 employees, and it's a nice business. It's not really a startup; it's a lifestyle business. Nothing wrong with that, or it's an SME. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not what people would call a tech startup, on a global scale, right?
I mean, it's very difficult. It's always the question, what is the intention? Okay, so like if your intention is, I want to support my family, then a business is very good. The moment you go more kind of like in the space where I would like to be is venture capital, then we're looking at companies that like we want them to grow fast and big. So like the question is always, do you rather have a 1% chance of the next Facebook or a 50% chance of an SME? Again, nothing bad with an SME. The question is, what do you want? And the spirit of the entrepreneur has to be accordingly. So if someone says like I'm fairly happy if I can get a 10 million revenue a year and then maybe sell the company after I retire, then like that's perfectly fine. And there's nothing bad whatsoever. Now, if you're saying like I want to take on funding from venture capital or funds, then there's a different expectation.
Like it depends who are you talking to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then the expectation is like, okay, like you wanted to grow fast, you're going to allocate resources / money into growth versus profitability, which is usually one or the other.
Sure. So recently you just came back from Israel again, and you touched upon it before. So what do you think are the key differences versus the Swiss scene?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, Israel is a very, very interesting country. It's very close to my heart, obviously. In Israel, like the mind is always from day one really connected to this global world. So they can't sell to the neighbors. Very hard to sell to Lebanon or Egypt or Syria. Is like not so simple. So they have to immediately from day one, when they start something, when they think of an idea, like they will always think like, how can we conquer the US? How can we go to Europe? How can we go to all of these big countries, and how can we conquer it like from day one? And that is a very different mindset. If you can like collaborate with your neighbors because you have to think globally, then you just say, okay, we have to make it work. Now, the failure rate is also not specifically small. So a lot of companies, they don't work out in Israel. But what they have the biggest advantage is like they really try to think big, very, very big, and execute on that. And sometimes they succeed, and many times they also fail.
Okay, great, understood. So you kind of touched upon your long-term vision, but what are the next steps for you for the next year, 2020?
Well, for me, 2020 is going to be super exciting. I mean, like we are now looking into onboard a couple of investors for our venture, so we can really grow much faster. Our ambition is to really grow our audience much more. That's also why we take on investors. And it's an interesting time where we see also already in the US that podcasts, videocasts, people who have kind of like a reach online get funding as if it was a startup. And I try to really kind of like be the forefront here in Switzerland But I mean, in the US, it happened already a few times that like podcasts get actual funding to grow further, which is a very interesting development. It's kind of like the beginning of the war of content. Can you be relevant online? Can you grow your audience online? And yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting to see if we can actually succeed against this vision.
Great. So good luck. And
Thank you.
I just wanted to know, I asked everyone, where can interested parties reach you? Obviously, they can watch you on YouTube and elsewhere, but also what kind of people would be the most relevant to help you with your vision?
Yes, I mean, right now we're looking for investors who either have invested in venture capital funds or are potential investors, so LPs, for example, and they'd say like, yeah, we want to build the next VC with a special USP. So these would be the right type of investors that we are looking for. And number two, you can reach me either through my email, cedric@globaltechbox.com, or through my phone number, which you can find online.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate
Cheers.
it.